Welcome to another one of my oil paintings. For all the details on the materials that I'm using today, please check below in the description. First thing we're going to do is, these are water-soluble oils. If you're using regular oils, just use your regular solvent. I am using water, and I am using a rather large brush to begin with. I will use large brushes for the whole of the painting. This is a 9x12 linen panel. And this is a 9x12 Soho Grayscale palette. It's actually the same palette I've used for my last two paintings. I just wipe it off and I reuse it. These are disposable, and there's a point when they are not usable anymore. But so far, they still keep a very good surface for mixing, and is the way that I can do my vertical palette setting so you can see the mixes. I am using Alizarin Crimson and the Phthalocyanine green, and I am using that to create a dark soapy mix. It's going to be biased to either the red or the green. It doesn't really matter. I just want to have a transparent dark, which is the way that I like to begin my paintings. This is going to be a scene of a landscape, so we're going to just establish a few lines. If you're painting with me, don't despair. You will be able to follow, and we're going to make a bridge here, and this bridge is going to have a reflection, and then we're going to go on a little bit of a bank. This bank, actually, when I took the photo, was actually very straight, but I'm making it with a little bit of a slant of a diagonal here so that it looks nicer. And the reflection in the water of this bridge is going to be important. This painting doesn't have too much dark. I took the photo of the painting, it's during the winter time in a sunny day, but I think it must have been sort of the middle of the day, because I don't have very strong darks or bright lights. Okay, so this is basically it for the darks. So sort of this is going to be like the reflection on the water of this particular bridge. And the bridge has, usually bridges, under the bridge is dark. The rest of it is not as dark. So now that we have the transparent darks in here, I just want to establish with a little bit of ultramarine blue on that same mix of the dark. And you will see that I use some of the mixes that I am making on top of the paint that I am mixing. That brings harmony. So I am using the same dark but with more blue here for some areas in the water. Okay, there is like a path here. I don't know if it adds much to the composition. Let's leave it for now. And I have just a few areas of blue. And this is a dark blue. We will be establishing lighter later. I like to start with transparent washes first and then add the opaque. The opaque color that I use in this limited color palette is the titanium white. And I also have, in addition, the yellow ochre, which is a bit more transparent. And then we have the transparent permanent alizarin crimson, the phthalocyanine green, and the ultramarine blue. Okay, so now we are going to establish a sort of a faraway line. This has not too much water, so I'm just going to mix it with water. Off camera, I am mixing the water. It's just to give me a little bit of an idea where I have the sort of far away. This is like a cityscape. And then I'm going to have some trees established here and the bank. I think for the dark areas that's sufficient. I am going to be introducing now a little bit of the yellow. And I am introducing it, as you see, on top of the other colors. So it's not a pure yellow. It's evidently became a bit greenish, and that's fine because some of these areas, I just don't want to have all of it in the same color. Because this is going to be an Alla Prima painting, some of it is going to mix with the previous color, and some of it, because it's oil-based, will be already a bit of an evaporation of the water, so it will be more tacky and able to mix less. All right, so I'm going to have some areas here with some trees and then the reflections in the water. I think this is going to be most of the painting, sort of attraction of the painting. Now, I do see there's a little bit of the bank. I didn't realize that it's sort of going in the back over there, and there's more reflections in here. And there's a bit, so just follow me. I know that you're not seeing the actual reference photo, and it might be frustrating for you, but if you want to see the end product and you like it, bear with me. And if you're painting with me, you can go to the end of the video, see what happened, and see if you want to give it a try. All right? Okay, so now we're gonna use a little bit more of this yellow. As you see, I'm adding, or I'm not adding as much water as I was adding before. This is not as soupy as it was before. So what I'm trying to make here is this kind of it's early spring now, so we're starting to see some colors here that in the foliage that are, telling us, spring is coming. There's still a lot of yellow ochres in this scene, but I can see this kind of color, whatever is reflecting in the water should be darker. So I am using the same dark I had before on top of that color that I created for these reflections in the water. That they definitely have to be darker than what they are reflecting. So just let's hope at the end you have an advantage over me. You can go to the end of the video and see what happened. I don't know what's going to happen, but I think it's going to be nice. Either way, we paint a nice scene and we have fun painting and relax in these times of uncertainty and pandemia. So I'm taping this still. We are on this second wave, trying to control what's happening with COVID-19. Anyway, so there's a lot of different colors here. I'm just putting a base, as you saw, with a little bit more of the yellow ochre, but right now, all my colors are here. I am putting a little bit of the lighter mixes on the right and darker on the left, but I like to use the same colors that I was using before. And I can see, at the end of the edges of the painting, it's always a good idea to try to put darker areas. So I'm going to come back to these darker, and I haven't cleaned the brush, as you can see. I haven't even wiped it, and I will show you when I wipe the brush. But I'm just going to use a little bit of a darker area here, just dark, muddy dark, and just make a bit darker area over here. I don't know what that is, and I don't want to be precise. I just want this to have a darker reflection on the water. This whole painting with the reflections of the water is going to have blue basically in the sky, but there's not that much blue because reflections on the water are going to be predominant. And there's a large tree here, and that's very yellow. And I'm going to make sure that that comes a little later. Now, we do have some reflections in the back here, and that's fine to just right now establish some color patterns, and we will go back later with more sort of brush strokes. My intention is not to be very specific, but give the impression of a scene just with large brush strokes. Same brush, I haven't changed it, and I'm just trying to fill up. You might wonder why I use white canvas and I don't tone the canvas like many painters do. I sometimes do tone the canvas, but for these for these videos that I make in YouTube, it's my intention is for everybody to enjoy and watch, and I think that painting on a white canvas, it's going to help people. If you want to follow me and you don't have, you're painting on paper and you might be using just regular color pencils, I think it's just easier for you to try to replicate or duplicate what I am doing here just with this white canvas. So I enjoy a lot painting on color canvas, but I also enjoy painting on white. It brings the transparency and the brightness. Alizarin crimson and yellow ochre. This is for the color of the reflection that I'm seeing here. So it's just, big statements here of color, not very defined. And I see more here that they are going to be close to the blues and then some green. So red and green are opposite in the color wheel, and it makes a nice contrast to the eye. Same as orange and blue. So I'm going to try to play with that contrast of putting oranges close to blues and reds close to the greens. Okay, so now this is going to be a bit lighter. I have not introduced so far, vertical palette is a bit challenging. I have not introduced white so far, but I think it's going to be about time for me to introduce it. White can dull your colors. So I like to introduce the white ones. I have established more of the transparent colors that I have. The white also pushes things a bit back, but it also catches our eye. So I like to first establish some of my shapes as you saw now, and then I'm going to just starting to make some notes with this lighter color. As you see, it became a bit of a salmon color. And what did I do? It was the alizarin crimson with the yellow ochre and a little bit of white. You need to test your white. This Winsor Newton Artisan line, which I love for oil painting. It's water-soluble oils. The white is not as punchy as their regular oil, so just get used to it. Okay, you saw me creating here a color that's very nondescript. Some people might call it gray, with basically I just took a little bit of the dirty area of the phthalocyanine green, red, yellow, and the white, and I am mixing it on top of what I had. And this is basically just to start putting some notes in here. There's some foliage in the back in there that's just very loosely seen, but not very descriptive. And then I'm just going to add some of that color. As you can see, I'm just grabbing it. So I push the color, not too much because the vertical palette is not very stable. And then I just grab it with a chiseled edge. You can see how nice these Simply Simmons brand, these get a very nice chiseled edge that I like for painting. You can just use the corner and you can create a lot of different shapes, or you can cover a lot of surface if you want it, just with different kinds of use of your brush. So, all right, I think this is good for establishing some of these areas. And let's go. We will do the lighter colors later. Later, but there's a little bit of light here. Okay. And again, it is lighter in the back. So things that go in the back, they're not only lighter, but they're also bluer, because I think the explanation is because there's more atmosphere between us and what's farther away. So even though some things may be catching the light, it's always good to have some sort of a bluish bias or tint in the things that are farther back. Like, you know, like all of this area that we had established. I'm just going with a second layer. Like I said, it's really not very specific. I want to get establishing, there's a light area here. It's light, but it's not white. I don't think I will use pure white in this painting, but it's definitely something that is being reflected in the water. And it may need a, so when I use white, I quote a YouTube tutor. Her name is Sarah Cedric. You can find her on YouTube. She says water is like salt in food. You really bring that flavor out. But if you put too much, be careful because you cannot really get rid of it. So with white, just go slow. Probably that's why I like this brand a lot, because this white is not the kind of white, even though it's titanium white, it's not the kind of white that will completely blunt the color that you're using. Okay, so that sort of is a reflection of something. I don't know exactly what it is. And I probably should, before going into the sky, there's two things I want to do. Is this bridge is kind of a greenish color. It may be copper or imitating copper, but I think it's way too bright. And then there's a tree here that I wanted to be the star of the show. So I will be painting the yellow of that tree with another foliage over here and a little bit of foliage here, this area here, and I still don't have decided what to do with this. It may actually be good for the composition. So with this same color that I have here, now that I have it, I'm just going to basically put some accents in here of reflections so that it's a varied reflection type. It's not all the same. And sometimes it's good not to actually describe to the viewer everything in detail. I mean, unless you like to do a realistic photographic rendering of the painting, which I wouldn't be able to do. I don't have the skills to do that. Okay, that was it. I carried over that dark color in there, and that was not my intention. So with oils, you can always fix things. And anyway, all right, so let's go over this kind of bridge. So the original bridge would be phthalo green with white, and that's going to make a very false, well, I mean, it's man-made, so it could be painted that color, but if I put it there, it's going to just ruin the harmony of the painting. So I am going to add probably all the other three colors, so that I can blunt a little bit that bright phthalo green, which is a wonderful color for mixing. If you are used to sap green, or if you are used to other kinds of green, you can get something similar, just mixing. Just use your colors and just learn how to mix them. I am going to add a bit of the yellow, brighter area in here, and probably white, and because I want to make a shadow area and a more lighted area. And usually to make something that's in the light, I like adding the yellow because it brings sort of the color of the sunlight. And this particular green, I think, could still use a bit more white. Let me talk a little bit about the palette that I am using. It's a middle gray tone. And the middle gray tone allows you to anticipate what you need. What do I mean by the middle gray. So if you have some grayscale value finder, this particular palette is right in the 50%, like in the middle. So if I want something that is brighter, I should have already known this was gonna be too dark because this is darker than my palette. So I needed something lighter for that area. So this grayscale value finder, you can find many of them, different ones. I like this because it's plastic covered. So if you actually happen to put your paints in here, you can wash it off very quickly. So we need to make it lighter. And I want to make it a bit sunnier, so yellow. And you can make your own color mixes. I think this is gonna work better. It's not a very bright painting anyway. Overall, it wasn't, it was one of those cold, wintry days, but we will come back with some accents of color. Now that's it for this kind of green, and maybe I can just add a little bit notes of some greenery here on top of the other colors that I am adding to make sure that, there's a little bit of harmony, even though that kind of bridge color is only there. I like to harmonize with the rest. And of course, we have to put some of that color, mixing that color in the bottom. So now I need to add a darker tone. So I'm going to put this brush on the side. And now I am going, that was a size 12. So I'm gonna either use a size 6 or maybe a size 8. I like to use large brushes because I have a very notable tendency to go for details. And even though you can like having details in your painting, but sometimes I actually saw my paintings and I realized that I was liking better the ones that didn't have that many details. There was more freshness to them. So I'm just experimenting with less details. Okay, so what I did was to put the shadow area here and then dot dot, because it's going to be a tree here that's producing that shadow. And then this shadow is reflected here. So let's go back to making a bit more of that shadow color. As you can see, my palette is building up with the different colors. I don't have that many color options anyway, but I'm putting all 3 colors now here for this dark. And it's probably going to be a bit too dark, but that's okay because first of all, it's on the edge. And secondly, the reflections below the arch of bridges, they should be the darkest area because the bridge obviously covers the light. Okay, so as you can see, I'm just making sure that I get enough paint because it's mixing, which is what I wanted. So I wanted to make it mixing with the other. And then there's this kind of reflection in there. So that's for the dark areas. There's other dark areas that now that this has dried a little bit, we can reestablish this dark. And as I mentioned, there's this sort of light column here. I have no idea what that is, but sometimes I like to paint the way that I'm seeing things and not necessarily understand what is it that I am painting. And I have found that often when I did not know exactly what I was painting, but I just do light and dark and shapes, when I see my painting, I understand what I'm seeing. And it's just a very nice feeling. Anyway, okay, the area here, It's the darkest area too. So there's the darkest areas, and this is basically where the edge of the canal meets the water. All right, so I think that's basically it for the darkest areas. And in this case, yeah, we have made a mistake there. I shouldn't have done that because, as I said, below the bridge is the darkest area. Okay, and it doesn't really matter that the bridge is not perfectly okay. Now this is dark, and then there's some of that green. So I had saved that same brush, and some of that green is reflecting also in the water here. So what you saw me do is take the color that I used here, but mix it a little bit with a shaded color because it's the water reflection, and just either, flat or vertical. It's just going like this and putting pieces of paint and leave it like that. I think it looks nice. If you don't like it, of course, in this style, you can paint on your own style. I'm just adding some touches of this same color in here. Okay, now I think we can work a little bit more on that area, which is lighter area in the back. And again, I haven't actually cleaned or wiped any of the two brushes that I have used so far. And that's on purpose. I just want to make sure that the brush has colors that I have used, so it will have a bit more harmony. There was definitely an area here that's brighter. And as you can see, it is brighter, but it does have a mix of that yellow and the green. I definitely think that makes for more harmony in this whole painting. Now, this is like a bank, and the bank is being sort of reflected below in this water. Okay. And this area of the bright green is sort of the one that's following here, this reflection. So I'm going to use the side of the brush to establish. The reflections usually go down, and for water movement, we do horizontal. Okay. All right, so what else? There's a little bit of a lighter edge on the top of the bridge, and it's not a straight line. So I'm just going to chisel, and as you saw, I grabbed the greenish and the yellowish, and I'm just gonna do different areas with this sort of color. I think it needs a little bit more of an accent, so I think it will need to be a bit lighter. Okay, now wipe. For the first time during this painting, wipe the excess paint off this size 12 brush. And off camera, this is water soluble oils. I am just rinsing the brush from excess paint in water because it's water soluble. And this is, I get a cleaner, although not completely clean, a cleaner brush. So it still has remnants of that greenish color. And I'm grabbing the piece of the yellow that still had some of that green. And, for no reason at all. It's just, I like that. So let's do the star of the show. Star of the show comes here. It's a nice shape, and then I don't know if it's part of the same tree or if this is a different tree, but it comes over here, something like that. Okay, so this tree is going to have some areas that are in the light and some that are in the dark. And then I have the tree that I had mentioned to you over here that's producing this sort of shadow over the bridge. All right, may have made this too a little bit bigger, but that's good because we're going to carve out that tree with sky holes. Okay. All right. There are some darker trees. Maybe not as dark. Yeah, that's probably too dark. Okay. Yeah, this is better. And there's the shapes are like, this one looks like a diamond almost. And this one here, almost like this. Again, we're gonna work with sky holes to make these trees. But those are the ones that are causing these reflections in the water. Okay, so now for water, we still need to establish a bit more of these colors in here. I don't even know what to call this color. As you can see, it's a mix of everything, but it's sort of greenish, greenish dark. And let's just, there's an area of dark here, but probably, okay, I'm grabbing what was lighter there, and I didn't mean to do that. So what I'm going to use is the brush I had for darks, and which was the smallest that I have used so far. I mean, it's not very small, but it's the smallest one. And I'm going to just brush strokes like this. This area that is sort of dark, it's also reflecting here. And this is the area of the bank. Okay, it will make sense. Eventually, this is reflection of what's on top, and these are reflections of the wall in there. So we'll just make it work. You'll see. Okay, I'm going to use this same dark and just mix it with pale gray to start making some areas in here that will hopefully start looking like there's holes on that tree, and those holes help define that this is foliage. So I am using a color that I'm also adding in the back here to sort of define a bit of these shapes. Okay. Now in here I see more rosy color, and the rosy color is definitely going to have most of alizarin crimson. And I used the pile that I had before. And I want to use more of this color, has the more of the yellow. So if we compare with this, this is dark, and I want to make a little lighter rosy color for some of these areas. Not all of them are going to need that very light color, but comparing to my palette, this is more or less the gray color tone so far. And I want to put some of these rosy colors. As you can see, it's a little bit of a similar, I mean, this is pretty much similar tone, we say, in the grayscale. And I think it needs a bit more of warmth, which is achieved with yellow. And that's because the white is, it makes things brighter, but it also makes them cooler, whereas the yellow makes them brighter, but it also makes them warmer. And some of this foliage that was by the riverbank was definitely sort of a rosy color. Okay, now it's just reflections. And here this was definitely a bit more yellow. I might need to get more yellow out in the palette, because I think I underestimated the amount of yellow this painting has. Okay, all right, and yeah, the reflections were very dark in this particular day. All right, so I think that this area would benefit from just having a nondescript sort of, this was like a path. This is where I was walking when I was taking this photograph. And I think it does anchor a bit the scene instead of making it all reflections. I still am not sure. Maybe I should make that all reflections. So how do we do that? I think with a palette knife I can just scrape off some of the color that I put in there. And let's just try making this all reflections. Make this up completely, because I don't know how the reflections would be, but I'm guessing that this kind of more reddish, darker reddish reflection would be continued here from this tree. Maybe we'll have an area of more blue in there, so this could be more blue. And because I don't know what this long reflection was, I think this would have, let's just fill it up and then I will put the blue in there. This is the bridge, and okay, I think, yeah, I like it better. Sometimes having a path in here, it's interesting. It's a good way to draw the eye to the viewer, feeling that you are there looking at the scene. But I don't know. This painting, I just didn't like it. It was a very nondescript path. Okay. All right. Now, let's do the, so I'm wiping off this excess color. And I actually like using fabric, cotton. They're very dirty, so for these tapings I like to use, to show you, I like to use a clean paper towel, but you can definitely use anything like cotton based. Okay, let's try to make now the color of the sky. And the sky is the lightest area of a painting. Remember, this is grayscale, so here anything that looks like the gray will look dark here. I have a lot of sky to paint. And then closer to the bottom, I think that would be a nice blue sky. Now, closer to the bottom, we're gonna have it with a tiny bit of phthalo green and more white. So you see sort of the difference between this sky color and that sky color. That one is bluer, sort of has a little bit more of purple or red. Ultramarine blue is a red bias blue, and the phthalo green has a blue bias. It's a green with a blue bias. And it's still a bit dark. So you saw what I did. I just added directly the the white. If you are painting with acrylics, it's not going to mix. So you would have to make your lighter mix and paint on top. But if you're painting with oils, it blends easier. So let's just go over this lighter color. I actually would like it a little bit more turquoise. And as you can see, I put the phthalo green, which another YouTube teacher, painter, Jessica Henry, she, in one of her videos, I remember she saying that phthalo green is great, but it's like kryptonite. So just watch out for kryptonite because it's very powerful. Okay, so I'm just going to be doing some dots here to shape this tree that looked sort of rhomboid to me, like a diamond shape. Very strange, but that's the way that I see it. So, and I like it. Sometimes I don't necessarily have to paint what I see, but oftentimes if you do like what you are seeing, then it's good that you try painting as you see it. So there's, sky here. These trees have more of an open area. Like I said, it's the beginning of the spring, so there's a lot of young leaves and branches that don't have many leaves yet. So I like to give the impression there's a lot of sky that you can see through, a lot of sky. And these are not the stars of the show by far, so we just need to make sure that this doesn't catch too much attention. So in this area of the sky, we're still using this sort of turquoise color to make this tree, which had an interesting opening branch in there. And there's a lot of areas where we can see through in this particular tree. There's less leaves, so there's a lot more areas that we paint with the sky holes. I mean, I know that there's this thing about you need to control your sky holes because it can become too much, but I think it depends on what you're painting. And if I'm painting this, for instance, that hat, in the image, I could see a lot because there's very few leaves coming. So you paint the sky holes, just trying to make sure that you see that if I have a trunk that's coming right here, just continue that trunk. Don't paint sky on top of the trunk because that would not be normal. I mean, you see the sky where there's no interruption, and sometimes the sky actually comes in blurred. So that's what I'm going to start doing right now. But before I go into the bluish color of the top, I'm going to work on this one. This particular tree had less transparency in terms of the sky holes. This is a different kind of spring tree. And this one definitely has a lot of sky holes. So as you can see, it's mixing. And sometimes I like that because it does give the impression that the light is just coming through. And there's like a halo of the color of the trees that this is sort of going through this light. This was definitely a very strange shape of tree. So if you don't like it, just make it your own and paint it differently. Yeah, it was like a diamond. And there's two trunks. So maybe there's two trees and that's why I'm seeing a diamond. Anyway, so you can paint, if you're painting along or if you want attempt something similar to what I am painting using this example, make it your own. Paint the way that you would like it. So now in here, we are going to see more sky holes in this particular tree, especially here. I can see a big blob in there. And the sky holes, we are told, should be a little darker than the sky. So that's why I mixed the darker blue and the one that has more phthalo. And I'm just putting the paint where I see sky holes peeping through. And I am trying to just make sure that the different areas, the tree has like a canopy, and then there's an area where it's kind of very bald, and then areas where the brighter blue is coming here. So maybe we need a bit more of the white, because I think this was lighter. So we see some sky holes. When you paint the sky holes, just don't necessarily follow what you are seeing, but are you liking where you have it? Do you want to have a larger opening in this canopy of this tree, for instance? Do you want to have more sort of the branches that are showing these sky holes? And definitely here, for the color of the sky, there were absolutely no clouds that day. And this was actually 3 days ago. This is my regular walk. I try to walk every day. And it was a beautiful, still cold day. All right, so yeah, I think as for the sky holes, the tree will come here, and there's a little bit more of an opening over here. I think if you are following me, it's good that you see where I am putting the sky holes. If you're not used to painting sky holes, it might be easier for you to follow what I am doing. And at the end, the painting will have a good sense of what you were painting. So as you saw, I took now the more ultramarine blue color mixed with that same more turquoise blue for the top of the painting, which should be a little darker than the rest. Probably a bit more ultramarine. Some of these skies in the cold weather do have that sense of more of the bluish, purplish color. And it was a very smooth transition, so this particular tree had an interesting sort of, maybe there's two trees again, but one of them was like rounder in here with some nondescript sky holes in there. And again, oops, I took the white without realizing that there was dark in there. And again, for the areas near the horizon, it definitely should be lighter blue. Okay. And I'm not really that worried that I am getting some of the yellow color on the sky. Maybe I should worry, but I am having fun. I hope you are having fun. I hope you are enjoying so far. And if you are enjoying, you might want to check some other videos in my channel. If you are a painter, you might want to try the way that I show my technique for painting, or you might want to just mix and match. I paint in acrylics or oils. I also paint pastels, but it's a bit more messy to set up for pastels, at least for me. So anyway, you can check some more of my videos in my channel and subscribe if you are interested. I have several different topics in my channel. Okay, so now I'm just going for the general shape. This particular tree was very round, and the edges are, I don't want to make them very sharp, even though it's like, I call it like the star of the show. This one, not this one. I don't want to make very sharp edges. I sort of like the idea that it's weird, and that you just get the idea that there's a tree there. Okay, so there's a bit more of these sky holes in here. Somehow it looks like a stormy day. I think I made the sky probably a bit too dark. Even when I have this palette, I often make that mistake of not realizing that I'm not going necessarily as bright as I should with the sky color, but it works. I mean, if it works, if the painting works, even though it doesn't look like the day when you took the photo, well, it's a painting. And if this is okay, so what I'm doing here, because this is the one on the edge, is I'm just painting the sky and mixing it a bit with the color of the tree. It's a little bit like when I take my glasses off, because some things, not everything needs to be specific or very well defined, and sometimes I actually find that having this blurred vision at the edges works very well. I don't know if you have watched the Nova more recent, of course I'm talking in 2021. There's a recent Nova PBS program about Da Vinci, and they do explain how Da Vinci realized that the edges of our sight, if we're looking at something, the edges are blurred. So just look at the thing that's your focal point, and the rest of it should be blurred. Problem is that when we are painting and we go and paint the things on the edges, we turn around and then this becomes focused. I like the idea of leaving things out of focus when we don't have that as the center of interest or the focal point. And I think, it's really hard, because when we are painting, we have the trend of just looking at what we're painting. The other thing that I've seen a lot, there's another painter. She is a wonderful pastel painter, and she has a great teaching style. She sounds like very, very nice individual. Also, her name is Karen Margulis, and what she does is that her reference photos are super minimal. They're like micro photos, and that actually, I think it's a very good idea for helping you just see the general shapes and forget the details. That way you can get a better sense of this is just, blurred. So I like the way this came out. And this, I don't think I'm going to do a lot more of details there. This is the start of the show, so this is the one that we need to work a little bit more on. And we just need to work a little bit more on these reflections and the brightest areas. So let's go on the brightest areas. Now, I have this particular brush now. Is a brush that has the lighter blue, and instead of going now for the lighter areas, as I said, not that I'm lying to you, I want to establish a little bit more of the color of the water. And the color of this water was very interesting because, like I said, I mean, it was cold. So it did have a little bit of the red. I think it had all the three darker colors. And I think that that could work. It was not a super bright blue in terms of the reflection of the sky. Okay, this is reflecting this little thing here. Okay. So I had a little bit of white on my brush. That's fine. And I am just painting horizontal for this blue. I like the way this blue came out in contrast with the rest. And there was a light, not light, a blue reflection of the sky over there. And then this is reflecting this tree. And let's just put a little bit of this blue here. So if I mix now this blue with the rest of these colors, it just blends a little bit because the colors are oils and they're still tacky. So it's allowing me to still blend a little bit these colors here. And going horizontal gives the idea of water. This was not running water. This was a canal. So it's not really wavy or anything. And there was absolutely no wind. So that was good because we were, I think this was maybe 20 centigrades below freezing, pretty cold. Okay, so there's some reflection of the sky in the back area here around this. It's reflecting, that thing is reflecting something that we don't see because it's behind there. Okay, I like that. I like the idea of having some brush strokes. My brush, it's opening up, and sometimes I just follow what my brush tells me to do. As you saw, I mean, this is dry brushing on top, and it sometimes works nice. And if it doesn't, being an oil painting, you can always change. Okay. There. I did not want that sharp line in there. So now, I think this became a bit too bright. So, because white is like salt, if you add too much, it's really hard to get the transparency back. The easiest thing is to wipe it off. And let me just try to get that nice, since I have it here and I have the brush, let's just reestablish that kind of blue color that I had before. Okay, so this is this thing, this fellow. Okay, let's work now. I'm going to be using this bigger brush only because that's the one that had the yellowish colors. And we are going to, this is the same, looks like the same shade, so I needed to make it a bit brighter. Okay, and this is gonna come in this particular tree, in some of these areas where it seemed to have been catching some light. And, you know, it's, as you can see, it's no precise formula. It's just, don't go over too much. I like to place the light areas, lighter areas, where I see when I just blur the eyes where am I seeing some of these lighter areas, and definitely in some of these here. And what's nice about having had the background color of the tree is that it allows me to add now some of these brighter areas on top, and it helps producing the idea of shadow. So this was more in the shadow, the other areas. And there were some, big brush helps me avoid details, as I told you. So you just have to learn to use it, and don't despair that it's putting lights where you probably were not counting on having those lights, but it works. Try it. It's a nice way. I've seen some painters that actually tell you that to learn to paint with less precision. Some people actually use their non-dominant hand. I would not be able to do that. I am very right-handed. So there's some light colors in this one here. I don't want to do too much catching attention on this one. And now we have some areas here that are in the wall really bright. They do have a lot of that sunlight. So as you can see, I added the last of my white in there. So I might need to get more light. And I'm just going to, I don't want to make this wall too precise. Like, you know, each stone. But I think it needs to have some definition in there. And then there's an area that's in the dark. What I'm going to do for that area in the dark of that bank is I'm going to add a blue-white color in there. But since I have this color now, I am going to also add some of it here in this edge. And I actually made a mistake because this should be in the dark. So this shouldn't have that bright color. And that one should probably have the same idea. So I just scraped and I got the white of the linen, which is fine. Yeah, so maybe adding some areas that look, you can see through here, some of this area around here. I don't want to do too much in there. Okay, now in the back here, we have some of them are catching some light. And this is the reflection that should be darker. Okay, let's go on this reflection, which should be darker. So I'm just going to use some of my muddy color here. And sometimes when it's being hard to get with the brush, I use the knife. Of course, I am painting on the camera is right in front, so I'm painting from the side. And that's why you see me holding the brush probably closer than I normally do. Okay, so now let's see. Yeah, this is a nicer, darker color, probably too dark. So for these areas here, maybe just a little bit of so that we, understand that it's reflecting that thing, that wall. Okay, and because there's brighter areas, just showing that it is reflecting that thing in there. I think this works fine. I think this is reflecting those things, and then trees that we don't see from here. All right, and now I did promise you I was gonna make a blue that was a light blue. And what I'm going to do is just take a little bit of that extra blue color of the sky. And with white, what I am doing is basically, this is a cool white. This is not white, but it's not white with yellow. And this is gonna come in the areas in here. that are in the shade. And it's just dab, 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 dab. And the reflections, dab, 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 dab. So same kind of grayish or bluish white. It's gonna have to be coming over here because that's in the shadow, and I will have to reestablish a little bit of that. What other areas are lighter that are catching some shadow? I think that's basically it. So finish the tree. All right, before finishing the tree, I am going to just get this area reestablished in here. And it's okay, you know, as you can see, you can make mistakes and then you can just correct them. All right, this was in the dark. As you can see, the darks that we established at the very beginning, I haven't touched them. This is the same transparent wash that we started with. And we've been painting around it just to create the rest of the painting. I like doing that. I enjoy that tremendously. And I hope that you like it too. We're close to finishing. So I just want to, I hope that we're close to finishing. With the same dirty brush. I think I need to just put some, because I had a path here, if you remember. This is an area that I had no idea how to paint because to me it's really hard to make things up. So, but I think that if we're seeing the bridge and whatever it's reflecting there, which I definitely see, but I don't know what it's reflecting. And this was in the shadow. So this thing here, if we continue making this water, I think it should be more of that sort of a yellowish reflection from that tree. Okay. Yeah, and I don't really know what else is that dark. I definitely see that dark, so yeah, it works. And if it doesn't work, I can always come back and paint that diagonal that was the path of the place where I was actually standing up. Okay, a little bit of a dark with, you can see, I'm just grabbing anything to make a dark. I don't want it too dark, so I'm just going to use my palette. As you can see, the use of the rest of the colors in my palette, it looks like a mess, but I did keep more like the darker here. I have areas of cleaner mixtures, like the blues, the greens, the yellows, and then these were an area like oranges and pinks. So there is an order to what seems to be very messy, but there is an order to it. And by keeping that order, it just helps me better to mix my colors. So I'm just making some notes here. In the sky holes, you would be able to see, actually you are able to see when you're looking at sky holes, you are able to see branches of the tree. And in other areas, this tree actually had like a big branch. Now, it wasn't that gray. It did have a little bit more of, and definitely it's behind the bridge. So I don't like painting too many branches anyway, but I think it does help with some definition. Now I am wiping the brush, and off camera I am rinsing it because that star of the show is the part of the painting I like the least, and I don't think that's a good idea. So we are going to be using a little bit of a purplish. Let's make like a purple maybe not that purple. Yeah, purplish color. And I used the area where I had the sort of pinkish oranges. And I'm just going to try to create here some areas of shadow or shade under the canopy. This would make sense that wherever the light is, the other areas are actually in shadow from the canopy of the tree. And definitely that was notable in these areas more in the bottom. I have to tell you that I think I used very thick paint very soon when I was painting the star of the show, because it should have been more transparent like here, so it would have been easier for me to establish some of these shapes and areas. Now that's looking very green, although it's more like in my brush, it wasn't that green. So I think that because I have thick paint, it's difficult for me to not mix with the previous paint, but let's make this work, okay? And because now I know that it's mixing, well, then let's mix it. And let's try to make the area of dark around here. And then we will bring back some light color in there. And the sky holes are working pretty much. I mean, this was a nice, interesting canopy, very round and then very fluffy around these areas. So for the fluffy areas, I haven't really cleaned the brush, and this would be a bit daring. So I think I'm gonna put a bit less of the white, more of these, maybe a hint of red, and just dot, dot, dot. It's still a bit dark, it's not as light yet. You add, see, I'm adding the same. It didn't look light here, but it does look light here. Why? Because I'm painting on top of dark. And it is said, I've heard it, that Singer Sargent said that he painted light by painting the shadow. And that's most likely what he meant. If you have something dark, if you have established some dark areas, when you paint something lighter, it then looks lighter. So we are going to try, not very well mixed. Let's see how this looks. Because I don't want pure white, but I do want lighter. Oh, interesting, because now I mixed it with blue. You probably said, what's she doing? She's mixing it with the blue. And so it shouldn't have been, but I think it's okay. I'm just being lazy. I should just get more white out. Okay, so this is just sort of mixing a bit like that blurred vision that I was talking about, where you don't know exactly where the tree is and where the sky hole starts. And I want to do that definitely here. All right, I think for this demo, we took now over an hour. I do believe this is improved. I think it may actually be better if I establish some darks just around the area where I want it lighter. As I showed you before, by establishing darks and they don't need to be that dramatically dark. So, because dark here is not as dark as here, which, by the way, I think this could do with a little bit of a layer there. But anyway, so this is sort of a grayish. The Phthalocyanine green and Alizarin crimson in my mind, make a very nice violet. Both of them are biased to the blue. So by mixing that kind of green, if you have sap green and cadmium red, I don't think you're going to get the violet that I'm talking about. But if you have if you have either Viridian green or you have Phthalocyanine green like I do, try it out. Try it out and you'll see that you are going to be getting the mixture that I was saying. It's more of a violet than you would have thought, than a dull gray. But, it all depends how you mix it. All right, what I did was to establish some darks, and I think I'm going to do a little bit more, separate this kind of tree area from the other. I think this would, and of course it's mixing now with the other colors that are still, this is the Alla Prima painting, so these colors are still not dried yet, but I think this should be distinguished from what I call the star of the show. And what I'm trying to do is establish some dark around it, and maybe so that we sort of have the hint of that tree in a better way, and we can actually see the back end in there. Now I just wiped the excess, and my problem right now with this area is that it's all sort of the same tone. It's getting to be the same tone, and it's difficult to distinguish. So what I can do is just, let's see, am I done with the star? So the star needs, okay, I'm just getting whatever I had and the yellow ochre. The yellow ochre is a very nice color right out of the tube for some of these fall foliage color. It's a very earthy color. Of course, it's from earth. And it's one of the colors that has been used since the Neanderthals caves, yellow ochre. So, sometimes I do make a big fuss about the materials that I use, etc. And then I wonder, the cave painters did it with whatever they had. No fussing around chiseled edges, and they did wonderful things. Anyway, why am I talking about that? I don't know. Okay, this tree now, or whatever bush is here, I think that brings the painting a bit better. I am just going to use a little bit of that blue color of the water and just brush it slightly here, because blue sends things back. And that is definitely back. So now this bush is in the front, that big tree is in the back, and this is in the back. So maybe I have to establish a little bit, and I'm just wiping, and maybe just a little bit of that nice blue sky in here, big blob. Yeah, you probably are thinking, why doesn't she just pull out that more white? I don't know. I don't have an answer for everything, and much less for things that I should be doing and I am not doing. Am I being lazy? Yes. There's another reason, is I don't know how to pause these tapings, and if I go now and grab the tube of white and I put it in there, you're going to be bored. So I hope that I'm not making you cringe and feel that I'm just messing up. I think now there's a bit more definition on this particular tree. This area of the sky, I may work on this offline once the painting dries a bit, because Alla Prima painting means that the layers of the paint underneath are still wet, and I am having a little bit of a problem with mixing the colors. I mean, the colors are mixing and I didn't necessarily want that. So let's just say I have now this tree, the canopy like that follows here, and there's an area that actually was falling in here. So that's weird, because this tree is supposed to be behind the bridge. So how can that happen? I don't think that should happen. So I think I should correct that. This should not come here. All right. It's probably good that you see how, at least how I make a lot of mistakes and fix them. Yeah, so that's now, that tree's in the back. And yeah. All right. So yeah, I think putting dark around the tree is helpful. I think we can just insinuate with a little bit of this nondescript lighter color. We can just describe a little bit that tree trunk, and then it's darker in there. And you probably are thinking, why am I not using a cleaner brush or a smaller brush to get in here? I don't like using a smaller brush. Really, I'm pushing myself not to do that, because I do tend to go for so many details, and I don't want to do that. So I think this will do for now, and I will tell you what I plan to do once it dries. And now that I go in the back, it looks okay. I think I can just make sure this reflection goes along with what it's reflecting. Yeah, I think it's working fine. It is an interesting painting. I don't have a particular school of painting, but I hope you enjoyed this demo. I hope you enjoyed watching how this is being developed by an amateur painter, and you get inspired to paint. I think only thing I need to do when this dries a bit, becomes more tacky, is this kind of color, just put it in the horizon. But otherwise, we have the canopy of this tree. Maybe some of the leaves are gonna match these, because it was a very symmetric tree. And again, I think even though the reflections were really dark, but now I'm putting a bit more of that yellow. I think it does make sense. It is reflecting the yellow. Okay. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. When I'm stepping back, I think there's an atmosphere. I think you can feel it. And the only place that I will be working on is this. So I will post this video with a cover photo of the final painting. Thank you very much, and if you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing and watch some other of my videos. And if you didn't enjoy it, just don't put the down bottom, just find another painting maybe that you like better. And thank you for watching.